What's the most impactful AI use case you've personally seen in the wild?
I think that with the world of AI merging with SEO and it getting completely turned on its head, I think that as you're trying to attract people to meet with you, I think there's a personalness to some of the AI sales channel tools out there that are going to help you get at bats so you can get that human interaction and sell. I think that email marketing's dead. Nobody wants to be pinged on LinkedIn, but kind of the intent based, figuring out who to touch when for the right reasons. I think that's actually going to really create a breakthrough. That's going to require you to stop the AI, get engaged with the person, and then you're going to have a much higher, like, I almost joke sometimes when I cold email, I think something with mistakes and grammar errors is more effective these days than having a perfectly written email, because people know it came from a person.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Ignite podcast. Today, we're thrilled to have Malcolm DeLeo on the program. He's the co-founder and chief business officer at GraphIQ, an innovation-driven platform reshaping how enterprise teams make sense of data. Malcolm has spent over 2 decades at the intersection of AI, go-to-market strategy, and scalable growth, leading sales, partnerships, and innovation initiatives at startups and giants like Clorox, Orbital Insight, and Quantified. His work has helped companies like KFC, Chipotle, Ancestry.com, align products, people, and processes to drive real outcomes. Today, we'll dive into the vision behind GraphIQ, what it takes to build a category-defining enterprise software in a crowded AI landscape. Thanks for coming on.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks a lot, bro.
So you've had an incredible arc, PhD chemist to innovation strategist. What sparked your shift from science to startups?
Yeah, it's always a funny story. I always like to kind of tell my story from, I went to graduate school for chemistry, and when I went, I never really thought about, like, if I didn't do chemistry when I was done, it would be a waste of my time. I got my PhD there. At Clorox, I had the opportunity to build prototypes for products at the beginning of my career, but not knowing a ton about cleaning chemistry, I actually started to partner a lot with our suppliers. And they created a group way back when in the late 90s called the Technology Brokerage Group. And a big part of that was, how do you bring innovation from the outside into the company and manage alliances to do that? And that was kind of the birth of my shift, because working and partnering for innovation is an art, and understanding how to build relationships and bring technology from outside the company to inside the company, where the company's kind of a little more standard, stodgy, not always, as innovative as some of the companies you're dealing with, was where I really cut my teeth on the shift, right? So that's where my evangelism began, which is bringing technology from out to in and convincing an older company how to take that technology and implement it. And actually, an important part is with no budget, no people, no authority. I mean, you're just kind of like a one-man gang doing that. So that's kind of where the shift started.
So how did this experience at Clorox and Damon Worldwide shape your views on innovation inside legacy enterprises?
Yeah, I think the biggest part is the importance of culture and the importance of partnering and the importance of transparency in that, right? There's a lot of ways to negotiate to do things. And one of them is transparently. And one of them is having trust in how you deal with your partners. Trust is a huge part of it, because when you can give trust to somebody who has a new idea and really kind of open them up to the possibilities of how your two organizations can work together, you start to create what an old colleague of mine called a creation ship, right? It's like full trust partnering. And what I learned is that, you can buy a tool to build a process that cultures will adopt. And when you're at a big company, these cultures can be very entrenched. So to bring these new tools into processes that drive revenue for the company really have a lot to do with the culture of change and understanding how to apply them. So the big thing I've learned is culture matters. Learning how to build skills to innovate in a large organization when you have no budget, people, or authority really is something you have to be passionate about. Like I write about that in my spare time, is what drives change and how to teach others to drive change and what skills do they need to do it. So that's the big thing I learned from working in big, large legacy companies.
So let's talk about the road to GraphIQ. What's the big problem that you guys are solving, and why now?
It was interesting. My co-founder, worked at Orbital Insight, where we were dealing with geospatial data, and geospatial data and geolocation data is really interesting. And we were solving some really hard problems, like looking at things like when a part of a plant was out, when there were anomalies in where people were visiting. And we started realizing that in that world that there's the concept of the area of interest. The area of interest is a place on the earth. And as we started to talk about that, there was a lot of opportunity to elucidate what's happening on the earth, where do trucks go, where are people traveling, who's doing what. And when you think about that concept, the concept I used to talk a lot about is what's happening in the area of interest, what's happening around it, and what's happening between 2 points within it. So when we left Orbital and decided to start our own company, the first thing we did was, as any good consumer packaged goods guy would do, and a product guy, we interviewed 40 companies to try to understand a problem we thought we'd identified, which was how do we map supply chains to understand where the trucks are going. And a funny thing happened on the way to doing all that research. Every time we asked questions of people, we got the same answer. There's no easy way to find companies to do business with. Like, it's a really hard thing. And this is a few years ago. It was like we either use Google, we call a consultant, we call who we know. But when we thought about that idea of area of interest, the part we didn't think about is, yeah, what's happening there around it and between it, but what do they actually do there? So that insight masked with the idea of at any given location on Earth, what are they doing there? It was kind of the birth of the insight of GraphIQ, coupled with our past working in social listening, where my partner Jens had built a giant knowledge graph of technical information for Elsevier. The idea of a knowledge graph of information meets what companies do, meets this insight it's hard to find companies to do business with. When you tie all those things together, that was kind of the birth of like our first prototype, which got us kind of off and running.
What was the aha moment that you guys were like, okay, we got to go build this?
It literally was time and time and time again in 41-hour conversations across verticals, across functions. There's no easy way to find companies to do business with. Like that was the pivot. The only pivot we made. We're like, what if we built this knowledge graph of company information that really understands entity resolution and facts throughout the web, bringing that all into one place to make it quick and easy to find basic company information. That insight itself was really the auspice for the whole idea. It's evolved into something much bigger, I think, that we saw at the beginning, but we're watching the market move towards. But that was the insight. That was it. That was the moment.
So some people might be listening out there and thinking like, well, can I just go to LinkedIn and search for stuff? Or can I just go to Zoom Info and search for stuff? Like, how do you guys differentiate and what is it like an order of magnitude better about GraphIQ versus those platforms?
For sure. And it's really interesting. I can talk about the market and as it's evolved. So the main impetus is how we go about it. So GraphIQ, we are a knowledge graph company, right? And if AI is models plus data, we are data, right? We are the data part. We are the part that people aren't talking about. In the world of large language models and agentic AI, it's garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah, data's kind of taken a back seat, kind of funny enough, it feels like recently with all the large language
Correct.
models. Because it used to be like data's the new oil and data's everything. And now like you don't hear that anymore.
And then on top of it, if data is the new oil, knowledge graph in the AI world are kind of like the tinfoil hat people in the basement who said, I'm going to build this interconnected web of information that's going to supply everything. And so that's a really big part of it. So what we do is we scrape the entire web and we use natural language processing, an older form of AI, which is much faster to use, to read every sentence. And then we have figured out how to Apple is Apple and tie all that information about Apple, whether it's who works there, who invests in them, who are their suppliers, customers, what their capabilities are, which we break every company into a capability fingerprint of information that says, here's what they do, which makes that searchable. We figure out who works there, job postings, news about them, location information. And because we've figured out how to build this very strong entity resolution linked to facts from all over the web, we've been able to interconnect all this information into a knowledge graph. There's over 280 million companies in it. It's grown 30% since we started. There's about 1 billion people. We have 1 billion news articles, 500 million locations, and growing. And the point is because we have kind of done this strings to things concept, where we understand the entities very well, adding information and tying it to those entities in scale becomes very possible. And the real opportunity is because of all the different types of information we've brought together. If you think about the landscape, you mentioned Zoom Info, you mentioned Dun & Bradstreet, you mentioned LexisNexis. Each of those companies kind of covers one thing, like they cover the news or they cover people or they cover company information. Because we have a knowledge graph, we have brought all that stuff into one place. And in fact, in the marketplace, what we're finding as we launched an interface to interact for consumers to interact with other business people, we're actually getting pulled in the direction of APIs because what's happening is the product market fit has become, I can get all this in one place. Yes, you can. And that's really sparked kind of almost an acceleration of our business because the knowledge graph concept based on data being the answer to all the AI problems is solving lots of different issues for different companies.
Well said. So thinking about the enterprise market, what's your wedge into the enterprises and who's your ideal customer?
Yeah, and that's what's interesting. I think the debate we're starting to have is, how much product-led growth do we use from our interface versus how much do we go after APIs? We've actually found I've been selling software for 15 years. I have the same pitch when I'm selling seats to our product. It doesn't matter what vertical. So it really matters what for the seats, it's going to matter how do we build the workflows. So the first thing we're probably going after, we found a lot of success in helping companies find sales targets or market development. Why? Because if you can search for a company based on what they do and very quickly figure out who works there and what roles they have, and then make that very easy to download and pump it into like a HubSpot, you can run campaigns all day long. So we can be more focused on the curation of the companies or the people. Another part of our knowledge graph, because we have all this interconnected information, we've built a very strong lookalike model where if you take a customer you have, plug it in, it takes the capability fingerprint, you click a button, it'll pull up thousands of companies anywhere in the world. And because we have location information, you can dig down from the region in the world, the country, the state or province, the county, the city, and in the United States, even down to the zip code. So we give you a lot of pivots there. On the API side, we're actually finding a wide variety of different companies. There's kind of 3 levels, right? The second level is I need a news feed. Very straightforward. We have some companies that are saying, hey, I'm formulating LLMs or agentic AI models together. I need a data source to plug into my system so that I can sell to a law firm or a supply chain company. They have more specific target markets. So that's the second part. And the third is those who are in the model business are going to need a giant knowledge graph to plug into. So we're actually sorting the market now based on those bigger buckets as opposed to like, what's your use case versus your vertical, right? If you ask me that specific question on the seat side, I'd say we're going after small to mid-sized manufacturing companies that have a technology that they can sell into any industry, like startups tend to be that way. Chemical companies are great. So, those kind of companies that have technology they want to apply in multiple places and they're not sure where to go next. That's the ideal customer profile. In sales, go to market, sales ops are probably the 3 people we're looking at. Long answer, but kind of a good way to look at it in total.
Yeah, and you said something interesting there is like everybody's talking about AI, but we're the data layer beneath that. And everyone's claiming AI is a differentiator now. Like you've seen a lot of hype cycles out there. How do you cut through the noise when everyone's saying, hey, we have the differentiated AI?
Yeah, the answer is kind of funny. If you really think about, so again, going back to my consumer packaged goods roots, right? The consumer perceivable benefit. Let's start there. AI has become so big because when ChatGPT and those customer facing rewriters or prompt and that kind of stuff comes out, it's the first time consumers have actively interacted with AI. Sure, it's been telling you what to write as your next sentence, but when you can take your words and rewrite them, that's what blew it up. Okay. But the problem is when you think about how you find information in the business world, when you search on Google, you just get another Google search. When you search on ChatGPT Perplexity, you get a narrative that leads to another narrative. What's missing in the real unlock is if you have the ability to curate the data you want in this giant quote unquote digital library, now you can say, I want to find all the chicken farms in Nebraska. And then you can point the language models at that, which is a very succinct and captured data set that you control, and then ask it the questions you want, then get the answers you need, and then have control to almost build your own digital library books. So data as the unlock is coming from knowledge graphs because it's going to give the user the control they're lacking in simply getting narrative after narrative after narrative where you're not sure where the data came from to give you those answers.
So what role does trust and transparency play in these platforms?
Yeah, it's a great question. Actually, the beauty of the knowledge graph is we like to say we don't really QA nothing, but we don't QA anything and we have attribution on everything. So a knowledge graph gives us the power to tell people where every specific fact was crawled, when it was crawled, how recently it was crawled, how often it's been updated, and then keep that information updated because you're consistently crawling and adding new information. So that's taken the black boxness away from what we're doing. That's why kind of the first iteration was the interface where you can type in, I want to find all the ball bearing companies in Germany over 25 million, and you get a curated list of companies with all the interconnected data, news about them, people, et cetera. Where we need to go is to start to summarize that information and make it so that you've curated the information. You can see where it all came from. You can understand what it's linked to. Now you can start to really go to town and how you report out on it, massage it or play with it. And that's why the APIs are valuable to companies because then they can formulate the data on.
I love that. The traceability of where the information comes from is so important.
Better said.
Yeah.
Better said.
Yeah. You can get to the source by just clicking through your platform and find, okay, this came from a Reddit post. Maybe I should, discount that a little bit versus this came from, some very trusted source, New York Times, whatever, Wall Street Journal.
Exactly.
What's been the hardest part so far about GTM for you guys? Any surprising lessons?
Yeah, I mean, there's a thing I like to talk about as a founder. I call them happy accidents. Happy accidents are the things that didn't happen that you thought were supposed to happen, and how you can leverage those into wonderful moments. So for us, we got started in 23, which is like the worst time ever to raise money. And the original thinking was, hey, we'll just slap a deck together and go get a couple $1 million from a VC and then we'll figure it out. And like that didn't happen at all. So the happy accident there is we had to bootstrap for like the first 10 to 15 months before we were able to get far enough along to like actually go out and raise an angel round, right? And so that was the first happy accident. I think the second happy accident is we've mostly bootstrapped and have a very small angel investment and been basically surviving on our revenue and that angel investment. And the hardest thing from a go-to-market perspective has been, I don't know, like to put it as like our ideas sometimes is kind of so stupid dumb when we started. I just don't think people could get their head around it because a lot of the venture firms are very focused. Like my joke is it's like a parrot, like ChatGPT, how's this different than ChatGPT? And like, you would say it's about the data. It's about, giving people the power. ChatGPT. Then it was like agentic AI. What about agentic AI? And we're still saying the same thing. The beauty of it and the happy accident is if you use the old where the puck's going analogy, I feel like everyone's skating into the corner to go after agentic AI, which I like to say is very narrow and deep, whereas LMs are very shallow and wide. And we're on the other side of the rink standing in front of the net, which is empty, waiting for the puck to skirt to slap it in. So the happy accident has been, we've been able to build our business very rapidly with very little investment, which is, I think, going to start to open up doors in how we want to scale. And I think those happy accidents are what we would have tried to scale a year ago, which is more on like the product-led growth side, is now we have an opportunity to take a step back and say, is that really where we should start? We should be doing both. What we should be doing next? So the happy accident has been, it's been difficult to raise money, but because we've kind of maintained control, done it in a smart and efficient way, and have, 39 customers on our seats, we're starting to sign API deals a little at a time, that it's given us a wider purview of what could be a much, much larger market, which was already huge, but could be even bigger.
Yeah. And
again, long answer to a short question.
I love it. And how do you think about balancing kind of that short-term revenue with the long-term category and value creation?
Yeah, I mean, I've been a chief evangelist 2 times, which before I was a founder was really evangelism is about seeing the true north at the end and coming back to today and saying, what do I do today to head me as close as I can to that? And part of the art of that skill or that role is being able to make the adjustments in real time as the data comes in. So the good news is balancing go to market is because we are completely customer focused. We literally meet with every other Friday, but every Friday we have no less than 15 customer meetings with people telling us why our baby's ugly. So we are constantly capturing data from the customer. It's core to us. And our roadmap is so robust that the joke I made is if, the most famous venture capitalists on earth met me in a bar one next week, and they said, hey, what are you doing? And they said, well, this is what we're doing. And they go, oh my God, that's huge. I'm going to give you $1 billion valuation and $100 million. But here's the catch. You're not allowed to talk to a customer and you have to go back into stealth mode. I'd look back at them and shrug my shoulder and go, okay, fine. Because we have so much customer feedback on what we should be doing or could be doing that go to market gets easier because as the data comes in, it's a question of what's the order and how do you bring the highest nails to the top at the right time. It's not a question of what to do, it's when to do it. And that's because we've been extremely customer focused in how we collect data, how we collect information, and how we choose to go to market. So it's made it a little easier because we're so full of things we could do. There's a term I use, there's no point solution fantasia, which is when you work at a company and they're like, we talked to a customer, we should go over here. And then they build an app. And then they go, no, we should go over here. Our roadmap is built collectively across multiple verticals and multiple customers and multiple sales interactions so that it's like Star Wars, Luke flying down the trench, like stay on target. Like we never leave the trench. We're always in it.
So what frameworks do you use to find the product market fit across these multiple verticals?
Again, I go back to the sales cycle. Like I've been able to pitch without agnostically. Here's what we do. Do you get it? Yes. Let me do a demo to show you the functionality. This is the seats. What do you want to do live? And you can start with a live can demo of you find all the ball bearing companies in Germany and you show them all the functionality. Then you kind of go into, hey, where are you from? East Jabip, Arkansas. Let me show you the long tail of our platform. here are all the restaurants in that small town you're from. And they go, look, I used to eat there. And then they say, hey, this is a real example. I'm looking for companies that coat aluminum piping in New England. And you show them it live, a search of the knowledge graph, and they go, there's 20 companies I've never seen before. And because you're willing to do that live, it really resonates, right? And it makes it real. So the ability to kind of bring the idea to life has made kind of our sales a bit agnostic. That's also been one of the challenges. It's kind of a horizontal play, and getting people to understand that, like, no, we keep selling the same thing over and over again the same way. The focus needs to come from, as I mentioned, we're going to go after market development. We're going to build a full cradle to grave, search for companies, use lookalikes, build lists, get the people, pump it into your CRM system, use your email campaign. Okay, that's a full rack of use case, right? But that's probably more what we're contending.
So you've built a lot of sales and innovation teams across lots of different orgs. What culture are you trying to create at this company?
Great question. In fact, I was talking to a bunch of different people recently. One of the first things I did as a kind of a culture warrior, I believe in culture and in a lot of ways. In fact, I told you it's kind of my hobby. We have 4 cultural principles. I'm only going to talk about 3 because the 4th one needs work. Jens and I decided extremely early to kind of say, what does our culture want to be? Not only what is it, how do we want people to behave? And then more importantly, which is actually the thing I'm starting to work on, what's the unintended evil side of those culture principles? Because for every culture principle, there's a downside to it. And then how do you manage it? So the first one is everyone grabs a shovel, but nobody's afraid to ask for help. So that's really about, we want people in our company that are willing to grab a shovel and do whatever work it takes to get things done. And we've actually seen that play out. Some of the success we've had, we're a very small company, but some of the success we've had is the people that have really thrived are the ones that have grabbed the shovel to try to figure out how to solve problems, no matter what level they at. Myself, Jens, we're always willing to solve the problem. The second one is know thy customer and channel their needs. And that sounds really obvious, but when we say know thy customer, I mean literally get to know them. I want to know Brian, about Brian, what makes Brian tick, not just what does Brian do for a living and where does he work. And channeling their needs gets to that whole concept of the customer and their needs. You always have to be an ethnographer trying to figure out what's the next big insight. How do we scale that insight? Where does it go? The third one, which is critical, which I learned from my partner when we were working together at Orbital, when the best idea wins, everyone wins. That's different than being collaborative. That means I don't care whether it's the top person, the bottom person. When you're in a meeting and you're solving a problem, the best idea needs to be quickly ascertained, identified, and agreed to move forward. That doesn't mean we're all going to collaborate here. It literally means there are no sacred cows. Wherever the best idea comes from, teaching people to say, no, we all think that's the best idea. Great, let's go. And the downside of that, which is one of the things I'm trying to figure out, is you can't have everyone in every meeting. Well, if the best idea wins, we all have to be there. No, you need to make sure that you have the right people in the right meetings helping you figure out. So those are the third ones. The fourth one's kind of like seamless execution leads to X or Y. We got to work on it, but those first 3 are very kind of embedded in who we are. And it's how we ask ourselves as we're growing our company, what's most important. So again, just to repeat, everyone grabs a shovel, but no one's too afraid to ask for help. When channel that customer and know their needs. The third is when the best idea wins, everyone wins. They're very juxtaposed, but they're also very critical to what we think is going to make a winning culture over time.
Now, before we continue, a quick word about an incredible resource for startup founders. This episode of the Ignite podcast is brought to you by Build, spelled BYLDD. So what is Build? Well, they specialize with early stage startups, especially non-technical founders and teams, helping you build and launch scalable revenue generating software fast and affordably. Most startups can't afford to drop 100K on some big design engineering agency. Freelancers are risky, inconsistent, and full of project management headaches. For 10K in about a month, they can turn your validated idea into a real market-ready product. It's built for scalability. Past clients have been accepted into YC, Y Combinator, very impressive, received backing from Google, and raised multi-million-dollar rounds. And there's an exclusive offer for Ignite listeners. Get a free UI, UX design sprint that's 3 to 4 weeks, a deep dive into your product experience, delivered completely free. This is normally a $10,000 plus service. So head to byldd.com, connect with the Ayushin team, mention the Ignite podcast. Let's get back to it. Are you guys remote or hybrid or?
We're mostly remote. And I mean, we don't have a formal office still. We've been getting by pretty well. Our chief data scientist, myself, are one of our sales folks, and Jens, we're all in the Bay Area. But our head of engineering is in Sweden. Most of our dev team is scattered about the world. we haven't had really any trouble with that at this point. I do think we'll eventually be we need an office space to collaborate and coalesce together. I think a lot of really great stuff comes when you co-locate. That's something we'll figure out over time. But right now it's kind of dispersed, and that's worked okay.
I feel like every pre-Series A startup now starts remote. And then there comes a time around the Series A, maybe Series B, but at some point you're like, we got to probably get most of the execs in the office every week. But you can kind of start bootstrapped, remote.
Exactly. You save money.
Yeah, you save money.
Needs to pay for a bit? Who needs to spend an expensive office when you need to go?
Why burn all that extra 6 figures of yearly capital if you don't need to? I mean, maybe more.
Absolutely. Yeah, exactly.
About fundraising and kind of founder lessons, what's one thing you wish more VCs understood about selling to enterprise or other founders for that matter? Yeah,
that's a really good question. There's so many ways to answer it. I think from the VC side, I think that if there's one thing I could, and again, I learned this because of my background. It's like, I'll tell a story. I once had a boss who was like an executive at really big consulting firm, and he used to kind of do everything by spreadsheet and by numbers and by scope. And again, I've always been a relationship-based innovation person that builds relationships, that builds revenue, that builds what I call the cultural side of business. And one time I was working for him, and he kind of chuckled at me because I was telling him about something going on. He goes, "Oh, Malcolm, the spreadsheets never lie." He literally said that to me, and I'm like, well, actually, you know what? And I'm a scientist. I'm a PhD scientist. Like, of course they don't lie. However, they never tell the whole story. And so as I've kind of gotten behind the Wizard of Oz curtain into the world of VC, as I like to put it, one of the things that I'd like to tell more VCs, I get it. It's like shopping for a house. If you see enough houses, you eventually know what's a good house and what's a bad house. But there's more to it than that. And the thing I would invite more VCs to do is really remember that to listen for those customer insights, that connection to the customer, how the company is or isn't attached to the customer. I think there's, as a more senior aged founder, I guess, there's a lot of people that want somebody hot and young with a big idea, but how many companies have we seen with big hot ideas that don't have any dollars coming in, don't have any customers willing to pay for it? So you can have the most brilliant, big, giant, visionary idea, but if you don't have people that know how to take it from 0 to 1, there's just no point. So that's on that side. On the founder side, my big one is a lot of things I've said here. I think from a founder's perspective, happy accidents is the big one. Always be looking for the opportunity to recognize the things you didn't do and how you dodged bullets, right?
Yeah.
Number one.
It's like
Number two,
accidental upsides is how you might phrase that.
It's a great way to say it. The second is, I think every founder needs to experience bootstrapping. The bootstrapping process was huge because you really have to be smart about every single decision you make every day. And that's now translating as we're starting to get some more success.
It kind of creates the culture at the earliest phases, right? This is what I tell founders that when they come to me and they're like, "Hey, I thought you were a pre-seed investor." I'm like, "Yeah, pre-seed meaning like you have some revenue. Like if you can't get the revenue bootstrap, like you're probably not a good founder. Like you need to be like bootstrap it to some revenue. Unless you're like a second or third time founder and you exited your last company to Apple, who cares, whatever. You're going to go raise like 5 at 50 right away or whatever from some, A16Z tier 1 VC. But I think for everybody else, like prove that you can take something 0 to 1 with just your sweat equity.
Right. No, and that's been huge because it's just made you more resilient, right?
It sets the culture up, like going forward, where now, even if you go raise a big seed round, you're not thinking, I'm just going to go blow through this and turn up burn. I'm good. Like that culture carries over of frugalness and like pinching pennies and being really smart about how you spend the money.
Correct. The other thing I would say too that's been really interesting is, how do I put this? I got into being a founder, which I didn't really talk about because I was 52 years old and like I was doing my job and getting paid really well in like 20 hours a week. And I decided I want to work for somebody.
Sounds like my time at Microsoft.
Yeah. I wanted to work for somebody who knew more than me, or I wanted to sit in the captain's chair because I've been advising founders for 15 years now. And there was this thing like, I need to sit in the captain's chair. A funny thing happened along the way. Like I have a blog post I wrote, like, what's your superpower? And one of the most surprising things is, sure, I'm facing the dragon and dealing with all the things I suck at and all the stuff that I have to get better at and all the things I'm afraid of, right? That happens. There's another side to that, which is some of my superpowers have gone like meta, like 100 times. Things that I was good at before, I'm 10 times better than. And so for founders, it's like, don't just challenge yourself to get better at the stuff you suck at. Try to pay attention to ways that some of your skills are supercharged, and don't take for granted the fact that they're supercharged, right? Like that's becoming really a powerful part of the journey, which is, what you learn, right? And how you learn it. And so, that's my advice for founders. It's like you really have to be willing to face the dragon, but simultaneously, recognize and don't let your hubris get in the way of the things that you're getting better at. Because why else are you in it if you're not learning? Sure, it's great to exit. It's great to make a lot of money. I mean, that's part of it. But the journey of what you learn along the way, if you don't embrace that part of it, you're not going to get through the hard times, the days where, you're going to hit the wall. And they happen in waves, right? They happen in waves.
So you've advised many startups. What's the most misunderstood part of scaling from 0 to, call it, 5 million of ARR?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of interesting. I told you, I think that the two big things are product market. How do I put this? I mentioned it. I call it point solution fantasia. I've worked at a few companies that they think because they have one client who's really guiding their development that they have what they need to start building an app that's good. They're like, we're going to sell this like hotcakes. It's like, no, you have to use what I call science-based sales. My thing, like, I'm not the 5 million to a billion guy. Like, I'm the, Navy SEAL who figures it out, builds it, and then someone
Yeah, you get the
scale it.
beachhead and then the Navy moves in later. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so when it comes to sales, I call it scientific sales method because I'm a scientist. You build a use case and you have to learn to hear enough data that there's product market fit, and you immediately start testing it everywhere you go, not committing you can do it. So as you're developing use cases on one side, you're testing and selling and learning about them on the other, and slowly kind of building them up. In addition to working, as I said, with your client, there's a really important part about being a founder and a sales-based founder. From my perspective, there's a huge difference between closing a deal and being a good salesperson. And you're talking to someone who, didn't get into this business as like a sales and services guy. It's like evolved into it. And I've worked with founders who close a lot of deals, but they're not scalable and repeatable. And they think because they close deals, they're a good salesperson. They're two totally different things. And if you want to avoid point solution fantasia, you can't just close big experiments and expect them to scale. You have to iterate constantly and recognize the importance of that iteration in your, what I call, iterative go-to-market strategy. Where are we today? Where are we trying to get to? What are we doing today? What happened today that's taking us there? How do we have to adjust? What do we need to do? What is the customer telling us? The other part I'd tell you is, in addition to, there's a difference between closing deals and being a good salesperson. There's also, and I learned this from my time back at Clorox all the way to now, is there's creating deals, doing deals, and managing deals. Most salespeople create and do, and customer success manages. There's very few people that do all three. Any founder who's not involved in all three of those and building the skills to manage the deals, creating, doing, and managing, won't succeed. Because if you want to see how to figure out how to scale, you have to understand the pain going on with once you close a deal to deliver on it appropriately.
So as a founder now, what's the biggest mindset shift been for you personally?
Getting comfortable with the idea that I am going to have to be part of the scaling. Trusting that the things I've learned along the first couple of years of this, that I can do the things that I wasn't sure I could do. So I have to evolve from just being that Navy SEAL to being the person that can actually scale. And I'm starting to see that happen. I mean, the joke I have is I've worked with salespeople for a long time, and they would, as the chief evangelist, and my job was like the executive level use case guy who like would come in, organize things, and then say, okay, here's, go close this deal, right? I didn't have to close it. I would create and do. And I'll come back to that thought and I'll add to it. One of my sales heads once told me, if you use a baseball analogy of, starter, middle reliever, and closer, he's like, you're the greatest middle reliever, was a chief evangelist, who's ever played the game. So in the middle of the deal, like I was the guy that took the nugget and got it over to the close. And then one day I looked at him and I said, yeah, and I'm a number 4 starter and a spot closer too. He's like, no, you're right. You're like, you can eat innings and you can close when you need to. The biggest shift has been believing in myself. And a lot of my sales compatriots would say, I'd be like, I'm a terrible sales guy. Like, no, you're really good at it. My evolution has been in this first couple of years, realizing that I have taken this from 0 to our current level of sales pretty much by myself in a market that didn't exist, with a product that we've created from scratch, and to trust myself that I have the ability, whether it's operationally or not, to see and scale how we get from where we are to the next level, to the next level, to the next level. And at some point, not have the hubris to think that I don't need to bring somebody else in who can scale better than me. I mean, that's, again, everyone grabs a shovel, but we're not afraid to ask for help. Well, I'm not afraid to ask for help if I need it. That's okay. That's a big shift for me, is trusting myself, I think.
So looking ahead, where is GraphIQ headed in the next year or two?
I think that we're standing in front of the net. And if AI equals models plus data, we're waiting for the puck to come to us. I see it. I think everyone's looking down the rink in the last 6 months. We have to position ourselves to be the data source knowledge graph of business OSINT or public business information globally that ties everything anyone needs into one place. That's the vision. And I think that's going to include a very robust data business coupled with a very robust product-led growth seat business. I mean, we got in this to help, Brian and Malcolm making granola bars in their kitchen, who need to find a 500-pound bag of flour locally and a place and a commercial kitchen to get out of our kitchen. I mean, we got in it to help the long tail, but we're realizing there's a lot more at stake here in the world of AI, where we can play a much bigger role helping and impact a much greater number of people.
So if you nail that vision, what's the future of enterprise intelligence going to look like?
It's going to be a digital library where every individual user has the power to find the information specifically they want, to have AI curate the knowledge they need from it so that they can build their own digital library of up-to-date information on anything they want from a data source that is constantly up to date, formulated with AI models that serve their needs together in one place.
But yeah, let's wrap up with a rapid fire. What's the most underrated skill in enterprise sales today?
I think it is, yes, the underrated skill in enterprise sales today. It's not the challenger sale, which was the big one. I think it's the innovation-based sale, which is really going beyond just asking questions. I think it's actually being able to channel and understand the use case of your user and being willing to facilitate them to places they don't know they need to go, so that they can buy technology they didn't realize they needed.
Who's the hardest company you ever had to sell into, and how did you win them over?
Oh, that's a good one. I think there's two. I think the first one was Taco Bell. I've worked with them multiple times. I would continue to be very close with, she's at Chipotle now, the head of data analytics, and convincing her back in the days of social listening that we could do live time crisis management with her was a journey that was really, really hard. It started with a $25,000 one seat deal and turned into a global deal with all of Yum, where we literally created and crafted their command center. That was a very hard, long create, do, manage the deal iteratively over and over again till we created a play where that was a huge market for net-based quid at the time when I was there as a chief evangelist. That was super hard.
What's a startup trend that you think is way overhyped right now?
That's a good question. Gosh, I don't know the answer to that one because I spent a lot of time on my own. It's kind of interesting. As an older founder, I'm still learning how to use AI. And I have a lot of people saying you can set everything up with AI and replace the people with it. I don't agree with that. I mean, I think you can add a lot of efficiency with AI, whether it's your tools and services, but people do business with people. And I think we're running to a place where face-to-face business is going to be way, way more important. I mean, getting people to the table with AI might be important, but in doing business is still going to be a human interaction type thing because people are creeped out by it. So this idea that you don't need to hire, you can have AI chatbots and AI assistants. I had a VC set up a meeting with me with their AI assistant, and when I realized it was an AI assistant emailing me, I was totally creeped out and I was like kind of put off.
How did that work? They had an email assistant?
It's like that, yeah, that like we pinged them and they said, we're here to set up, like we pinged them and then somebody wrote back and said, we'd like to set up a time with you. And then I was like interacting and it felt like a human. And then at one point it's like, I'm an AI assistant. I'm like, ew.
Yeah, why don't you just send them a Calendly like everybody else? Like why do this back and forth with an AI? That's dumb.
And it made me kind of be like, this is impersonal.
Sometimes an interface is better than an AI, right? Like,
yeah, exactly.
That's funny.
So your point's well taken. Like I think it's creep. Like there's a creep factor to AI that people are bringing it into their company so much they're losing the humanity of innovation and alliance management. Like that's a huge piece of success when you're in a startup.
Yeah. Let's take the flip side of that. What's the most impactful AI use case you've personally seen in the wild?
I think that with the world of AI merging with SEO and it getting completely turned on its head, I think that as you're trying to attract people to meet with you, I think there's a personalness to some of the AI sales channel tools out there that are going to help you get at bats so you can get that human interaction and sell. I think that email marketing's dead. Nobody wants to be pinged on LinkedIn, but kind of the intent-based, figuring out who to touch when for the right reasons. I think that's actually going to really create a breakthrough that's going to require you to stop the AI, get engaged with the person, and then you're going to have a much higher, like, I almost joke sometimes when I cold email, I think something with mistakes and grammar errors is more effective these days than having a perfectly written email, because people know it came from a person. So I
Yeah,
think
I
getting
mean,
people to the
I
table
debate
with
this
AI
because
is going to be
I
hard.
basically dictate my emails now to ChatGPT, right? I'm like, hey, I need to reply to this email. Here's what I want to say. Here's some things that I want to cover, blah, 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 blah. A minute or two, like dictating to my assistant. And then I copy and paste the email I'm replying to in there, and then it spits out this perfectly worded reply. But it came from me. It was just me dictating it.
Right. And I mean, as you start to have your own agent, like I have an agent that helps me blog a little bit. It's my writing completely, but it's been able to help me take incredibly complex theory. I mean, this isn't for for GraphIQ. It's like my own writing, incredibly hard concepts that I'm really trying to write that I could write, but would take me 10 times longer, and lets me kind of spit them out, push a button, and then I can deal with it. Like
Yeah.
that part of it I think is useful. But when it becomes inhuman, I think people get turned off.
Yeah, I don't even read articles anymore. I just do deep research. Anytime I want to learn something, I just ask ChatGPT to go research it for me, write a 10 or 20 page research paper on whatever I'm looking to
Yeah.
learn. It's pretty
And
amazing.
and that for me as a PhD scientist makes me want to vomit, because you're talking to a guy that went into the stacks and used to get like, journal articles and look at, like, I had to look up everything. There was no chemist. It was all by hand.
Yeah.
And one of the things that makes me afraid is, yes, there's an efficiency to learning that way, but there's something about, digging into things your own way. Like, I think getting the right information to dig into is helpful, but if you don't learn how to, cross the T's and dot the I's yourself, your critical thinking skills start to kind of deteriorate. And it's really important not to do too much. Like, I believe that's a dangerous, slippery slope. Of course, we're all heading to Star Trek, where the kids have a little, thing, and they're doing incredibly high order math at eighth because the computer is getting rid of all the stuff they didn't need to know. So there's kind of like a six, one half dozen the other. But yeah, I'm a little nervous about doing research that way. It's getting too easy sometimes, right? And that's because I'm old school.
It is pretty easy.
I grew up in an analog time, so it's tough.
Well, I like it because it'll also link all the papers. So like if there is something that I'm like, oh, I really want to learn, I want to go deep on that topic, I can click into the paper and read it.
Exactly. That makes sense.
If GraphIQ had a superpower, what would it be?
Data, man. We are the data. I mean, that's the superpower. And one thing I'd
Knowledge.
say is, yeah, knowledge. Yeah, better said. Every company has one core comp. Every startup, I wrote about this, one core competency. Anything you do is going to be built off that. GraphIQ's core competency is the building and management of this knowledge graph of company information. That is our core competency, and that is what's going to take us wherever we're going to go. And if you think about every company, they have one. So if you don't understand what it is, and you think the things you add to your company are making it different, they're not. You have one core competency. So that's ours.
Right. What's a lesson that you still apply every day from Orbital Insight?
That's a good question. That's a hard question to answer, because I think everywhere I've ever been, because I kind of believe my theory side of me, from Orbital Insight, the biggest thing I would say, let me think about that a second. Well, the biggest lesson I learned from Orbital Insight is actually, I talked a lot about the bootstrapping. I mean, that was a company that was really hot, got a lot of money, and went through a lot of it. And watching what could have been, it was such a wonderful idea in a market that's still sort of maturing. I still do some calls about geospatial, and that market, it's been very hard to mature, because the cost per shot of satellite imagery hasn't gotten cheap enough that the use cases scale. So, just because you have a huge idea doesn't mean the market's ready for it. And I've seen other companies say, we're ready to scale. And you're like, no, we're not. We're only here. So the lesson has been, go fast, go hard, be smart, right? Like, be smart.
What's more important in early stage GTM, brand clarity or brute force outreach?
I think brand clarity. I think knowing what you're good at and where your product is and how far along it is much more important, because when you're engaging with your early customers, it's very easy to misread go-to-market product market fit signals. Again, in fact, I wrote a post called, "Hey founder, can you even handle 100 customers?" Right? Most startups are like, "I just want to have 100 customers." Like, can you handle 100 customers? And so early stage brand clarity is important, because that's also like, is this product ready for us to sell 500 seats to one company, or scale this way? And we have actually added a lot of customers when they say, hey, I'm looking for 3 to 5 users so I can meet with you every other week. I don't need 100 right now, because I need to learn from you what's working, what's not, so that I don't scale too fast. So brand clarity is probably more important. than brute force.
What's a founder or exec you think more people should be learning from?
Oh, that's a good question. You know, it's kind of funny. This is going to be a really weird answer. I mean, to me, it's kind of, I never thought I'd say this, but it's kind of Bill Gates. Bill Gates' arc to me is very wonderful and fascinating because we saw somebody who conquered the world many years ago, and we've watched him evolve into a global philanthropist, in my opinion. People have different opinions of him, but he's really taken his money and tried to make the world better. And I think as a leader, that interests me. There's a lot of people that become drunk with power, and I think as they make, you look at Mackenzie Scott, who divorced Bezos, and what she's done with all her wealth is to try to give back and make things better. So I think the founders that understand the difference between that money is freedom, it's not about power, to me are the best role models. So that gives you a way to look at the value core of the person you're working for, to say, is this a person, if they suddenly were worth $10 billion, is going to do good, or they're going to succumb? And I see Bill Gates as an example of someone who had an epiphany somewhere along the line that realized, like, the only good that I can do is to give back. Even Warren Buffett, these people that have really succeeded, but they see their job is to either foster the economy, foster, global issues, things like that. So that's a far out version of a leader that you want to work for, because then you kind of can build a culture of trust and a culture where you're really going to feel as though you matter. And when in our work, we want to matter. Right. And that's important to me.
What's a bold prediction you have about the future of B2B software in the next, say, 3 to 5 years?
I think it's going to become even more critical than it ever has. And that's because with the advent of AI, the places that I've seen it in our own product, we're able to help people find information. If you think about your day, there's 10 activities I'm supposed to do. And there's 10 activities I have, but there's 5 that I never get to because these top 5 are, there's some that are just too hard. So the biggest trend in B2B software is going to be how the efficiency of an individual worker and the amount of ground they can cover can go up exponentially. That doesn't necessarily mean you need to replace people. It means that you're going to be able to enable people with B2B software tools that, if they're cogent and use them and how they formulate them together, you're going to be able to run your business not only more efficiently, but you're probably going to be able to grow it way faster. So the biggest trend is going to be formulating your toolboxes in a smart way with the skills of your employees, with the functions that you need to really supercharge, whether it's marketing, sales, business development, finance, that everything's just going to go faster, more efficiently, so you can make your company bigger and better.
Well, where can folks find you online?
You can find me at my email, Malcolm at GraphIQ, GRAPHIQ.ai. Our website's graphiq.ai. You can find me on LinkedIn, which is always a great place to find me. I'm happy to talk and speak with anybody out there about what we're doing.
Awesome. Thanks so much for coming on. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you too. I appreciate it, Ryan. Thanks for the time.